The Golden Lotus was not merely a restaurant. It was a theater of silence where the city's most dangerous predators came to feed, and tonight, the air was thick enough to choke on. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears from the vaulted ceiling, casting fractured light over velvet banquettes and mahogany tables that cost more than Elena's entire life. She stood by the service station, her hands trembling imperceptibly against the starch of her long black skirt, the red vest feeling like a target painted on her chest. She was 22, invisible, and trying to remain a ghost in a room full of people who made ghosts for a living. The maitre d', a man whose smile was as sharp and cold as a scalpel, snapped his fingers near her ear, the sound cracking like a whip. "Table 1, he whispered, the words hissing through his teeth. "The chairman is here. Do not make a sound unless spoken to. Do not look them in the eye. Pour, bow, vanish." Elena nodded, her throat too dry to manage a verbal response. She knew who sat at table 1. Everyone in the underworld knew the Park family, the royalty of the syndicate, the sharks that swam in the deepest, bloodiest waters. She picked up the heavy porcelain teapot, the ceramic biting into her palm. As she moved across the plush carpet, the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to die away, sucked into the gravitational pull of the 3 men sitting in the center of the room. 2 bodyguards stood like marble statues in the periphery, but Elena's eyes, against her will, flickered to the man sitting to the right of the elderly chairman. He was the son, the heir, Jonah. He was 31 years of old, possessing a beauty that was almost offensive in its cruelty. His suit was tailored to a lethal perfection, outlining broad shoulders that held the tension of a coiled spring. He didn't sit, he presided. His eyes were dark voids, scanning the room not with interest, but with the boredom of a lion deciding which gazelle would die least painfully. As Elena approached, the scent of expensive cologne mixed with the metallic tang of something sharper, gun oil or perhaps just the aura of violence, assaulted her senses. She felt the heavy weight of her own history pressing against her spine, a secret she had buried under years of silence and feigned ignorance. Here, in the lion's den, she was just a waitress, just a body in a uniform. But as she neared the table, the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, reaching for her ankles. The memory hit her like a physical blow, a sudden fracture in the linear progression of the night. 7 years ago, the smell of rain on hot asphalt and the distinct, briny scent of the harbor in a city thousands of miles away. She was younger then, a child of circumstance, swept up into a household that was not her own, learning to survive in a language that did not match her skin. The orphanage had been cold, but the house she had served in was colder. She remembered the old woman who had taught her to speak, the cook who had hidden her from the angry men who came to collect debts. "Speak the old tongue, child," the cook had whispered, pressing a warm dumpling into her hand. "It is the language of the hearth. It commands respect from the elders. It is the code of the inner circle." Elena had learned the dialect of the southern provinces, a rough, guttural, yet affectionate way of speaking that was dying out, preserved only by the families who held onto the old traditions with iron grips. It was a dialect of fishermen and warlords, of people who understood honor as a currency more valuable than gold. She remembered the sound of waves crashing against the rocks, the feeling of hiding in the pantry while heavy boots stomped through the hallway. She remembered the fear of being discovered, the knowledge that her existence was a complication. Run, Elena. Run until the ocean stops you. And she had run. She had crossed oceans, changed her name, buried her voice, and hidden in the noise of the West. She had become nobody. She had become a waitress in a red vest, serving tea to men who would burn the world down for a perceived slight. But the past was not a place you left behind. It was a shadow sewn to your heels. Elena's hand shook as she reached the table. The steam from the teapot curled into the air, a white ribbon dancing between her and the monsters. She poured for Junho first. He did not move, did not acknowledge her presence, but she felt his awareness like a laser burned onto her skin. He was watching her reflection in the polished silver of his cutlery. She filled the cup with precision, stopping exactly at the rim, terrified that a single drop spilled would be her death sentence. Then she moved to the chairman. The old man looked frail, his skin like parchment paper stretched over brittle bone, but his eyes were alive with a terrifying intelligence. He was coughing, a wet, rattling sound that made the bodyguards tense. Junho leaned forward, his expression tightening, a flicker of genuine concern breaking through his mask of indifference. "Father," Junho said, his voice a low baritone that commanded the air around them. "We should leave. The air here is too dry for you. Sit," the chairman wheezed, waving a hand dismissively. "I am not a corpse yet. Let me eat in peace." Elena finished pouring the tea for the chairman. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She needed to leave. She needed to vanish, as the maitre d' had said. But the chairman's cough worsened, a violent spasm that shook his thin frame. Instinct overrode survival. It was a muscle memory from that other life, from the nights spent tending to the old cook who had saved her. Without thinking, without processing the insanity of her actions, Elena placed the teapot down and reached for the glass of water, offering it to him with two hands, her head bowed low. And then she spoke. It wasn't English. It wasn't the standard formal language taught in universities. It was the dialect, the specific, rustic, rare dialect of the chairman's home village, a way of speaking that implied intimacy, deference, and a shared history of the blood-soaked soil of his birthplace. "Honored elder, please drink slowly, or the wind in your chest will become a storm," she said softly, the vowels flattening, the cadence rhythmic and lilting, a sound that belonged in a fishing village 40 years ago, not a luxury restaurant in the city. The silence that followed was absolute. It was violent. It was the sound of an executioner's blade pausing at the top of its arc. The clinking of silverware at nearby tables seemed to stop. The air conditioning hum vanished. Every guest within earshot, those who understood the language and those who merely felt the shift in atmospheric pressure, froze. The chairman's glass halted halfway to his lips. His hand, shaking moments before, went still. He slowly turned his head, looking up at the African-American waitress standing in her cheap uniform, his eyes wide with a shock that bordered on reverence. It was as if a ghost had just walked through the wall and spoken to him in the voice of his dead mother. But it was Junho's reaction that sucked the oxygen from the room. The young boss stood up. The movement was fluid and terrifyingly fast. His chair scraped against the floor, a harsh shriek that made 3 people at the next table jump. He didn't look at his father. He looked at Elena. His expression of boredom was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces, replaced by a look of intense, predatory focus. His pupils were blown wide, black holes absorbing the light. He looked at her as if he were trying to solve a complex equation that had just insulted him. "What did you say?" Junho asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a loaded gun. It wasn't a question. It was an interrogation. "Who taught you that tongue?" Elena realized what she had done. The blood drained from her face, leaving her lightheaded. She stepped back, clutching the serving tray to her chest like a shield. I apologize, sir. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to speak the dialect of the inner circle?" Junho stepped around the table, closing the distance between them. The bodyguards had hands inside their jackets. The entire restaurant was watching, breath held. "That is not a language one picks up from television. That is the tongue of my father's village. A village that no longer exists." He towered over her, radiating heat and menace. "Look at me." Elena forced her eyes up to meet his. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. "I am just a waitress," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Liar, Juno isid." "Take her to the back," Junho commanded, not breaking eye contact with her. He signaled to his head of security. "Clear the kitchen. Everyone out."
Now.
Sir, the guests. The maitre d' started to protest, appearing at Junho's elbow, sweating profusely. Junho turned his head slightly, giving the man a look that could wither crops. Did I stutter? The maitre d', pale, bowed instantly and began barking orders. The kitchen staff was evacuated in a flurry of white coats and terrified glances. Elena felt a rough hand grab her upper arm. Not painful, but firm, inescapable. It was Junho himself. He didn't delegate this. He gripped her with fingers that felt like steel bands, marching her through the swinging double doors into the stainless steel cavern of the commercial kitchen. The noise of the dining room was cut off instantly. Here, under the harsh fluorescent lights, amidst the smell of roasting duck and simmering reduction sauces, the isolation was complete. He pushed her back against a prep table, pinning her there with his body, though he didn't touch her anywhere but her arm. The dynamic had shifted violently. She wasn't serving him anymore. She was his prisoner. You have 5 seconds, Junho said, his face inches from hers. She could see the gold flecks in his dark irises, the faint scar running through his left eyebrow. Tell me who sent you. Tell me which rival family paid you to learn that greeting to get close to my father. If you lie, I will know. No one sent me, Elena gasped, her heart hammering against the metal table behind her. I swear. I learned it. A long time ago. You learned a dead dialect from the southern coast? He laughed, a dark, humorless sound. A dialect only spoken by the families of the blood pact? You expect me to believe that. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You are either a master assassin or you're a ghost. Which is it?
I'm nobody.
Elena cried out, tears springing to her eyes. I was a servant. I was a child servant in the House of the Lotus. I learned it from the cook.
Juno froze.
His grip on her arm loosened slightly, his brows knitting together in confusion. The anger didn't leave his face, but it was joined by something else, doubt.
Shock?
The House of the Lotus? He repeated, the words tasting like ash. That house burned to the ground 10 years ago. Everyone inside died. He looked at her, really looked at her, searching her face for the truth. Who are you? I told you, Elena whispered, her defiance rising through the fear. I am the one who survived. Junho did not release her. If anything, the confession seemed to tighten the invisible noose he had draped around the room. The kitchen air was heavy with the scent of unpolished copper and the lingering steam of 100 meals, but between them, the atmosphere was sterile, cold, and sharp. He studied her face, dissecting her features with a clinical brutality, looking for the lie in the tremble of her lip or the dilation of her pupils. The House of the Lotus was a ghost story, a tragedy whispered about in the back rooms of gambling dens, a massacre that had supposedly left no lungs breathing. For this woman, this waitress with the eyes of a frightened deer and the voice of an ancestor, to claim survival was akin to claiming she had walked out of a nuclear blast with her skin unmarred. He reached out, his hand moving slowly, deliberately, towards the collar of her white shirt. Elena flinched, pressing her spine harder against the cold steel of the prep table, her breath hitching in a jagged rhythm. If you were of that house, Junho said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in her chest, then you carry the mark. The servants of the inner circle were not merely hired, they were owned. They were branded to ensure loyalty, to ensure that if they ever ran, they could be returned like lost cattle. His fingers grazed her collarbone, the touch scorching despite his cold demeanor. Show me, or I will assume you are a spy sent to put a bullet in my father's head, and I will dismantle you right here on this floor. Elena's hands came up, shaking violently, to undo the top button of her shirt. She had spent a decade hiding that mark, covering it with makeup, high collars, and the anonymity of poverty. Revealing it felt like stripping away her skin. She pulled the fabric aside, exposing the slope of her left shoulder. There, etched into the dark skin in a faded, jagged white scar was the stylized outline of a lotus flower wrapped in barbed wire. It was ugly. It was a mutilation disguised as a badge of honor, a remnant of a feudal system that refused to die. Junho stared at it. The aggression drained from his posture, replaced by a hollow, haunted recognition. He traced the scar with his thumb, his touch surprisingly featherlight, as if he were touching a holy relic or a cursed object. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator compressors and the thudding of Elena's heart. The contact shattered the present, dragging Elena backward into the smoke and the screaming. 10 years ago, the night the sky turned orange. She was 12, hiding in the dumbwaiter, her knees pulled to her chest, listening to the sound of gunfire popping like firecrackers. The house of the Lotus was burning. The heavy timber beams cracked like thunder, sending showers of sparks raining down into the grand foyer. She could smell the accelerant, gasoline mixed with something sweeter, chemical, and wrong. Through the slat in the dumbwaiter door, she had seen him. Not the man standing before her now, but the boy he had been. He was 21 then, standing amidst the carnage, his face smeared with soot, holding a gun that looked too heavy for his hands. He wasn't shooting at the servants. He was shooting at the attackers, the men in black masks who swarmed the estate like locusts. She remembered his eyes. They were the same terrified, furious voids she saw now. He had been screaming for his father, screaming for the guards to protect the exits. He hadn't set the fire. He had been trying to fight the inferno. She remembered the moment he locked eyes with her hiding spot. For a split second, amidst the roaring flames and the slaughter, he had seen the terrified girl in the dumbwaiter. And he had turned away. He had turned away and fired at the men approaching her hiding spot, drawing their attention, drawing their fire, leading death away from her so she could crawl into the ventilation shaft and vanish into the night. He didn't know she had survived. He had assumed she was just another casualty, another ghost in the ashes. But she remembered. She had carried the debt of that saved life for a decade, a heavy stone in her gut. "It is real," Junho whispered, the words sounding foreign in his own mouth. He stepped back, the predator finally retreating, leaving behind a man who looked suddenly unmoored. "You are the girl from the pantry, the one the cook called Little Shadow." Elena pulled her shirt closed, her fingers fumbling with a button. "I am Elena now. That girl died in the fire." "No one leaves the life," Junho said, his voice hardening again, the vulnerability vanishing behind his iron mask. "You think you can serve tea to the very people who burned your home and remain anonymous? Fate does not allow for such coincidences." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the narrow aisle between the stoves. "My father. He thinks he saw a spirit. If he knows you are alive, he will want to keep you. He believes in omens. He believes you are a sign that the old power is returning." "I don't want to be a sign," Elena pleaded, stepping away from the table. "I just want to go home. Please. I won't say anything. I'll leave the city." "You will go nowhere," Junho snapped, spinning to face her. "Do you understand the danger you are in? If my enemies find out a survivor of the Lotus exists, they will hunt you down to finish what they started. You are a loose end. You are a witness to the night the truce was broken." Before Elena could respond, the heavy steel doors of the kitchen burst open. It wasn't the maitre d'. It wasn't the staff. It was a man in a waiter's uniform, but the fit was wrong, too tight across the chest, and his movements were too precise. In his hand was a silenced pistol. The world slowed down. The assassin raised the weapon, aiming not at Junho, but at the easy target, the witness. Elena saw the barrel rise, a black tunnel of infinite depth. She didn't think, she moved. The instinct that had kept her alive in the orphanage, in the streets, kicked in. She grabbed a heavy cast iron skillet from the drying rack and swung it with every ounce of hysterical strength she possessed. The skillet connected with the assassin's wrist with a sickening crunch of bone. The gun clattered across the tiled floor, sliding under the commercial oven. The assassin let out a grunt of pain, not a scream. He was a professional and lunged for her, drawing a knife from his belt with his other hand. Junho was already in motion. He didn't shout. He didn't waste oxygen. He was a blur of violence. He intercepted the assassin, driving his shoulder into the man's chest, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the dishwashing station. Plates shattered, a cacophony of ceramic destruction. The assassin slashed wildly, the knife catching Junho's sleeve, slicing through the expensive fabric and drawing a line of blood across his forearm. Junho didn't even flinch. He grabbed the man's hair and slammed his head against the stainless steel counter once, twice, 3 times, until the man went limp and slid to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Junho stood over the body, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm onto the white tiles. He looked at Elena. There was no judgment now, only a terrifying intensity. "They are here," he said, his voice calm, contrasting the violence of the room. "They found us." "The chairman," Elena gasped, the realization hitting her. "He's still out there. Stay here," Junho ordered, pulling a handgun from a holster at the small of his back that she hadn't even noticed.
No.
Elena grabbed his uninjured arm. "The front is a kill zone. If they are in the kitchen, they have the front doors covered. There's a service corridor behind the wine cellar. It leads to the alley. It's the only way out where they won't see us." Junho looked at her, weighing her worth against her risk. He made a decision. Lead. They burst out of the kitchen, not into the dining room, but into the narrow hallway that connected the back of the house. The sounds of panic were already filtering through the walls, screams, the crash of overturned tables, the distinct bark of unsilenced gunfire. The ambush had begun. Elena hiked up her long skirt, her shoes slapping against the concrete floor as she sprinted toward the private dining alcove where the chairman sat. They found the old man overturned in his wheelchair, his bodyguards engaging a group of 3 attackers near the entrance. The room was chaos. Bullets decimated the crystal chandeliers, raining glass shards like diamonds. The chairman was on the floor, clutching his chest, frail and defenseless amidst the storm. "Father," Junho roared, raising his weapon and firing with terrifying precision. 2 shots, 2 bodies dropping. He moved like water, fluid and unstoppable, clearing a path to the old man. Elena didn't have a weapon, but she had the layout. "This way," she screamed, grabbing the chairman's arm and helping Junho hoist him up. "The wine cellar."
Now.
They dragged the old man through the debris, ducking as a bullet shattered a vase inches from Elena's head. Glass sprayed into her hair, but she didn't stop. They reached the heavy oak door of the cellar. Elena punched in the code. She had memorized it watching the sommelier, and the door hissed open. They tumbled inside, the cool air of the cellar offering a momentary respite from the heat of the violence. Junho slammed the door and shot the electronic lock, sealing it fused. "The tunnel," Elena panted, pointing to a rack of vintage reds. "Behind the 1982 crates. It's an old Prohibition tunnel. It comes out 2 blocks east." Junho looked at her, his eyes blazing in the dim light. He was bleeding, his suit ruined, his life in tatters, but he looked at her as if she were the only solid thing in a disintegrating world. "You are full of secrets, little shadow," he murmured. He didn't wait for a response. He kicked the crates aside, revealing the dark, damp opening of the tunnel. He hoisted his father onto his back, the old man groaning in pain. "Move," Junho commanded Elena. "You go first. If there is a trap, you trigger it." "Charming," she spat back, adrenaline overriding her fear. "Practical," he corrected. But as she climbed into the darkness, she felt his hand on her back, a steadying, protective weight. "I will be right behind you. Do not stop. Do not look back. If you fall, I will carry you." The tunnel was damp, smelling of mold and earth, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury above. They emerged minutes later into a grimy alleyway, the sounds of sirens wailing in the distance, closing in on the restaurant. Rain had started to fall, washing away the blood on Junho's arm, mixing with the soot on Elena's face. A black sedan screeched around the corner. Junho's extraction team. The back door flew open. Junho practically threw his father inside, then turned to Elena. She stood in the rain, shivering, her red vest dark with water, her white shirt clinging to her skin. She looked at the open door, then at the street, the urge to run warring with the realization that there was nowhere left to run to. "Get in," Junho said. It wasn't an order this time. It was an invitation to hell. "I can't," she whispered. "This isn't my world. It has been your world since the day you were born," Junho said, stepping closer, ignoring the rain soaking his ruined suit. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was hot, his grip possessive. "You saved the chairman. You saved me. You spoke the words. The ghosts are awake now, Elena. If you walk away, they will kill you before sunrise. If you come with me." "If I come with you?" she asked, looking up into his dark eyes, seeing the danger and the strange, magnetic pull of a shared trauma. "If you come with me," Junho said, pulling her toward the car, toward the darkness, toward him, "you will never be a servant again. You will be the one they fear." He didn't give her a chance to argue. He guided her into the leather interior of the car, the door slamming shut, sealing them in together. As the car sped away, merging into the city traffic, disappearing into the sea of lights, Junho didn't let go of her hand. He sat in the darkness, watching her, the enemies to lovers dynamic shifting into something far more complex, far more dangerous. The waitress was gone. The survivor had returned. And the king of the underworld had just found his queen in the wreckage.